It started with the ground splitting open under my boots and a sinkhole swallowing $2 million homes in the cul-de-sac. I can still hear the roar like a dam giving way and see the dust cloud curling up into the night sky. And in the middle of all that chaos, HOA President Walter Granger turned on me barefooted in his t-shirt and screamed, "This is your fault." Funny thing is, I'd been warning him for weeks. My name's Daniel Brooks. I'm a former combat engineer, 2 decades in the Army, and all I wanted when I came home was silence, horses, fences, the smell of dry earth and leather. My family's pasture in Tennessee had been in our blood for 4 generations. My grandfather built the barn with his hands. My father laid the fences. When both of them were gone, I came back to set things right. But while I was off fighting wars, the countryside changed. Where there used to be open fields, now there were cul-de-sacs lined with vinyl-sided houses and pristine mailboxes, all run by a shiny new homeowners association called Silver Glen HOA. I never signed anything with them, never agreed to join, but that didn't stop them from acting like they owned me. First, it was notes in my mailbox about weed compliance. Then, Connie Clipboard Queen marched up my drive to suggest repainting my barn so it matched the neighborhood tones. I told her politely my barn predated her entire HOA. She didn't laugh, and the worst of them was Walter Granger, the president, tan-polished smile eyes like glass marbles, who looked at my land like it was an error in his subdivision blueprint. I kept my head down at first. I fixed fences, bred horses, avoided their meetings. But then the trucks came. One morning, I heard diesel engines groaning and metal clanging, and when I crested the hill, I saw 3 rigs fenced off with orange barriers already chewing into the earth less than 50 yards from my line. No notice, no knock, nothing. Just men in hard hats and a woman in a navy pantsuit. Connie, of course, smiling like she was hosting a barbecue. She told me the HOA board had approved exploratory drilling, that they suspected oil under the ridge good for property values. I told her flat out the ground there wasn't stable. Beneath that ridge was karst limestone riddled with hollow tunnels, the kind of terrain that could pancake itself with the wrong vibration. I'd studied it overseas, I knew what I was talking about. But Walter appeared all confidence and told me they had certified engineers. He even invited me to voice my concerns at the next HOA meeting. I reminded him I wasn't part of their association. His smile didn't flicker. "That's unfortunate," he said. "We'd have appreciated your cooperation." So I went back to my house shaking not from fear, but from the cold certainty that these people were going to break the land. I pulled out my old topo maps, my drone scans, even ground-penetrating radar reports from a few years back. And I set up cameras along the tree-line vibration sensors in the pasture. If they wouldn't listen to warnings, I'd build a record they couldn't deny. The drilling didn't stop. If anything, it escalated. 4 flatbeds arrived with rigs that looked like they belonged in a fracking documentary. They ran day and night, the grind of metal biting into stone seeping into my floorboards until I woke before dawn with the horses pacing like they sensed the earth's nerves shaking. And then came the paperwork violation notices duct-taped to my gate, fines for unauthorized soil disruption, threats of legal action over disputed boundary parcels. Connie even showed up at my driveway. Sweet smile hiding the knife. She said if I signed a participation agreement and joined the HOA retroactively, I could share in the royalties from the oil. Otherwise, she hinted I'd have no protections. That was the moment I knew it wasn't just ignorance, it was intimidation. I told her to get off my land. The neighbors began to turn cold. Alan, who used to buy hay from me every spring, crossed the road instead of meeting my eyes. Rumors spread that I was unstable, that I was planting cracks to sabotage the HOA. And I'll admit, I started to doubt myself. Alone in the dark, staring at fissures widening near the fence line, I asked if maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I'd been back from war too long seeing threats where there weren't any. Maybe I should just let it go. But then the ground itself answered. One night I heard a sharp crack echo through the pasture, and when I shined my light I found a split in the ridge 3 inches wide, deep enough that a stone dropped inside, never bounced. That was no phantom. That was geology talking. And I remembered every lesson drilled into me overseas: you don't ignore instability, you act before it collapses. I reached out to an old contact councilwoman, Dana Holloway, who I'd served with in the National Guard. She looked into the HOA's permit and found it was incomplete fast-tracked with no geological review. And I called in a favor from Dr. Everett Toller, one of the best geologists in Tennessee, a man I'd once dragged out of a jam in Kandahar. He came, ran his tests, and told me straight the HOA's rigs were boring into a hollow chamber stretching 80 yards under the cul-de-sac. One more push, and it would cave. We went public. Everett filed an emergency injunction. Dana began pressing the city. And Liz Marston, an investigative reporter, walked the ridge with me and wrote the story that blew everything wide open. HOA, drilling on collapse zone. Experts warn of sinkhole risk. She even quoted me. They think bylaws protect them, but the land remembers every cut, every scar. That line stuck. It spread online faster than the rigs could chew through limestone. The HOA scrambled. Connie issued a bland statement about safety protocols. Walter went on local news trying to downplay the risk, but sweat beaded on his temple. And neighbors who once whispered about me now noticed cracks in their own driveways, sprinklers collapsing into sudden pits. The land was shifting, and they couldn't ignore it. Then came the night. I couldn't sleep still too heavy, and then the ground groaned like something alive. The windows rattled, the horses screamed, and suddenly the ridge exhaled. The earth collapsed with a roar that swallowed rigs, fences, and houses like they were toys. By the time I reached the ridge, a crater the size of a swimming pool gaped in the cul-de-sac, 3 stories deep, dust rising like smoke. Neighbors poured out in pajamas, staring into the abyss. And there stood Walter. Eyes wide, hair disheveled, screaming across the void at me. "You sabotaged us. You caused this." I didn't answer. I didn't need to because Everett walked up beside me with his GoPro still recording and said calmly, "We warned you. You drilled into a karst void. Now, nature's collecting payment." Walter lunged, but firefighters blocked him. Sirens wailed, floodlights cut across the sinkhole, and by sunrise, emergency crews had declared the area a geological hazard. 2 homes gone, 3 more condemned rigs vanished into the earth. Reporters swarmed, cameras rolling, and suddenly the story wasn't me against the HOA, it was science against arrogance. The board tried one last trick, sending me a cease and desist accusing me of defamation, claiming my soil flags had caused panic that my warnings forced Ridgecore to cut corners. Desperate lies. I hired a litigator who chewed through their claims like paper. We filed a countersuit with every timestamp, every camera clip, every geological chart. In court, Everett testified, "If Mr. Brooks hadn't spoken up, if he hadn't flagged the soil, this wouldn't have stopped at 2 houses. We could have lost lives." The judge dismissed the HOA's case with prejudice. By then, Walter and Connie had resigned in disgrace. Ridgecore had vanished from state records, and the new interim board was left to pick through the wreckage. My land still stood. Their homes didn't. And that's the truth of it. The land doesn't care about bylaws. It doesn't care about glossy notices or intimidation or desperate lies. The land remembers. And if you ignore it long enough, it will make sure everyone else remembers too.